Welcome back to BBN After Dark. And once again, unlucky with the rain this weekend. It feels like we kind of got away with a couple weekends early in the season where we thought it was going to rain and then it didn't. And then the last couple weeks, man, we've just been getting killed with rain. Nobody got to play Saturday. Nobody got to finish their tournament on Sunday. We did get a couple teams that got to play a game or two, but for the most part, not a lot to talk about on the field. So wanted to go ahead and use this as an opportunity to update our BBN top 50 prospects. This is a list that we did back in November of 2022, and then we updated again after the winter for 2023, and now finally we're updating it into the fall season. And I'll tell you what, this is an early example of this list. We will do this list again toward the end of the fall because I think a lot of new guys who have barely gotten to give their first impressions. I think we'll see a lot of new guys start to jump up this list and jump onto this list if they're not already, but a good chance to update this BBN top 50 prospects list. So let's go ahead. We'll just start at the bottom and work our way up. I'm going to go ahead and give a sentence or two about each of the players from 50 to 41, and then I'll let Bernie and KJ pick a player they kind of want to go in depth on. So let's go ahead and start at number 50. Anthony Young, 16U prospect. He's our number 4 6U prospect, number 5 first base prospect. A guy who I've liked since he joined the Bears. A guy who a lot of power and I think is, putting together a very nice season for himself. So I like Anthony Young. I think he could definitely work his way up the rankings if he has a really good fall. So excited about what he's been doing. Nate Pollard coming in at number 49. He's our number 19 outfield prospect, number 17 14U prospect. Again, a guy who I think's made a lot of strides in the last year. I think his defense is kind of where he lives and dies in the outfield, and then his bat, which I do think has come along. I think the next step for Nate is to show those results in a game, what he's been doing in the cage. So I think Nate definitely has a lot of potential, comes in at number 49. Andrew Kahlberg, a guy I like a lot, our number 6 catching prospect, number 3 16U prospect. This is a guy who, again, defensive first guy. If he could really start producing with the bat in games, because his bat in the cage, I think, is very, very solid. If he can start producing in games, I think he'll fly up this list. Ethan Portell coming at next, number 18 at outfield and number 14 and 15U. A guy who's put together a very nice season, both with the bat and on the mound. A guy who I think's impressed a lot of people. Jaden Coleman comes in at number 46. Defensive first guy once again. I think that's kind of the trend with these lower end of the top 50 is a lot of guys who are one-dimensional right now. I think Jaden Coleman definitely fits into that defensive first mindset. Although he's come a long way with the bat, we need to see him take a couple more steps forward to really fly up this list. Trenton Hurst, number 45. Again, kind of one-dimensional, a guy who's definitely bat first and then the rest of his game still developing. A guy I do like a lot in Trenton Hurst, who I think has a lot of potential for the future. Max Sandler, our first rookie coming in here on the top 50 prospects. He's our number 18 infield prospect and number 12 15U prospect. A guy who I think solid glove, solid bat, solid arm on the mound. He kind of, doesn't necessarily stand out in any of those aspects, but is just a solid player across the board. I like him a lot as well. Caden Fimber coming in at number 43. He's a number 5 catching prospect, number 15, 14U prospect. A guy who I think his defense and offense have both come a long way, and I think he's had a very nice season as well. Noah Chilton, another rookie. He's our number 42 prospect, number 16 in the outfield, number 11 at 15U. A guy who's got a good body, strong, and I think if he could really fall in love with the gym and get a lot more experience in tournament baseball, I could definitely see him becoming something. And then Liam Killian is going to be our number 41 prospect. He's our number 4 first base prospect, number 14, 14U prospect. A guy who big, strong, and a guy who, if he really steps up his work ethic over the winter, I could definitely see him flying up this list. But this is our number 50 to 41. KJ, going to start with you here. Any guy that you kind of want to go in depth here at the lower level of our top 50 prospect?
I'll touch on Anthony Young. Again, I think his bat has come a long way. I think his biggest problem before was that he wasn't, he's got a big body and he wasn't getting the most out of it. And I think, lately, especially in free swing, and you can see the results in the games kind of happening as well. He's getting the most out of that big frame he's got. He's swinging the bat violently. I know his record's in the 90s, and he's putting up consistent high 80s in free swing. So this is a guy again I like a lot. Obviously, he's not going to give you much on defense or base running or on the mound, but I think he could be a legit bat. He swings the bat very violently, and I know that's something that a lot of the top level teams look for.
Yeah, he's having a solid season. He's hitting 444, a over 1,000 OPS. I think the big thing for him is when you look at him, you expect a big power guy, and he's only got 2 extra base hits this season. I think that's where he needs to improve. Maybe start putting some balls over the fence because he's not necessarily the fastest guy. So I think he needs to start putting some balls over the fence to really fly up this prospect rankings. But guy was having a very nice season. Bernie, anybody here from 41 to 50 that you want to touch on?
Um, I will. Let's do Trenton Hurst. Um, this is a guy that I think a while back no one was ever talking about. He's come a very long way over the past year or so. He's performed very well with Kryler, and then he got moved up to Bell for a while. He's seen flashes where he's batted toward the top of the order on Bell, but he's basically been a mainstay toward the bottom of the order. But he's been a very good player for them. He's got in. I mean, hits the ball hard in free swing. He's in precision pitching. I think he could throw strikes in the future. So I think he's becoming more of a you know, I think he hits the ball hard right now, but he could become more than just that one-dimensional player.
Yeah, 100%. He's a guy who I like a lot. I like his work ethic. I like what he does with the bat, and I think definitely if he can A, get bigger, and B, kind of expand his game. He doesn't really have a position. We've just kind of been sticking him at second base or corner outfield. He doesn't really have a position that I think he owns. So if he can kind of expand his game, I think he definitely could be a big player for us in the future. Moving into the top 40, starting with number 40, Jacob Lowry. He is our number 15 outfield prospect and number 8 13U prospect. This is another rookie, a guy who I think again, it's only been 2 practices and 2 weekends, but I think he's shown enough to warrant us keeping an eye on him. A guy who I think is going to work hard in practice and a guy who I think has a decent amount of skills. So I like Jacob Lowry, what we've seen from him so far. Michael Heine coming in number 39. He's our number 17 infield prospect, number 13, 14U prospect. This is a guy who I've fallen in love with the work ethic that he's had. I think he's very raw right now, but definitely if he puts in the same work ethic all winter that he had the first 2 weeks, I could definitely see him flying up this list. Reed Rustio is our number 14 outfield prospect and number 12, 14U prospect. Again, a guy who's actually relatively polished for being a rookie to the Bears. He's pretty polished. Once again, kind of like Trenton Hurst, I don't know that he necessarily stands out in any aspect of the game so far. He's a solid defender, solid hitter, solid pitcher. I think if he can really put the work in, I think he could grow into a very solid player for the Bears over the next 6 months or so. Nick Byrne coming in number 37. He's a veteran in the Bears, been here a long time, but a guy who is really starting to find his footing, I think. He's number 13 in the outfield, number 13 in the outfield and number 7 at 13U. Again, a guy who's been working hard for a long time, and I think he's starting to see the fruits of that labor coming to fruition here. I think he's put together a very nice season. William Baldwin, another rookie. He is number 16 infield prospect and number 11 at 14U. Big, strong kid, hits the ball really hard. Not sure what we're gonna get from him on defense, but a guy who I definitely think could be a big power hitter going forward for the Bears. Kobe Kennedy coming in number 35. He's our number 3 first base prospect, number 10, 15U prospect. Again, very good hitter. A guy who's hit really well all season long. A guy who's he was a number 44 prospect preseason, now moves up to 35. So put together a nice season and keeps climbing these ladders. Carson Werner, another rookie here. He's number 34 prospect overall, 12 in the outfield, 6 at 13U. Solid glove, solid bat, a guy who I think will develop over the next couple months. Johnny Armbruster, number 33 prospect. He's number 2 at first base and number 10 at 14U. Big power, good bat skills, so-so on defense, but a guy who I think continues to get better. Josiah Leaker coming in number 32. He's a number 15 infield prospect, number 9, 14U prospect. Great pitching season, great defense, but I think the bat is where you kind of want to see him take a step forward over the next couple months. And then rounding out our top 40 to 31 is Ennis Walsh, another 13U rookie. He's our number 14 info prospect, number 5, 13U prospect. Guy who's brand new. I haven't seen a whole lot of him other than that first practice, but a guy who I think, solid body, looks like a relatively polished player in comparison to a lot of the rookies. So a guy I think I like a lot so far. But Bernie, I'll start with you this time. From 40 to 31 here, any prospect you kind of want to expand on?
Yeah, I'll talk about my boy Reed Rustio. He's joined the Bears as a rookie this year. Came in, jumped into some extra programs. And like you said, he's a little more polished than a lot of these rookies that come in. Like you just watch him play catch. He stands out a little bit because just how he catches the ball, he throws the ball, he looks very clean doing it. But I'm excited for him because I don't know if he's ever had the opportunity or the opportunities to work as hard as he's going to be able to work this offseason. So I think as a guy who already looks pretty fairly clean doing everything, I think with the opportunity to work hard, come in, take a lot of reps, I think he could surprise some people next spring.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you, Bernie. I've been very impressed with what we've seen from him so far. KJ, any player from 40 to 31 that you kind of want to expand on?
Yeah, I'll talk about Jacob Lowry. He's a guy who's going to play infield. Um, he's starting to already develop that kind of free swing mentality. He's a guy who jumps in programs right away. Very limited games on Sunday, but I got to see Jake Lowry taking a bat, and he was just very aggressive, swinging hard. And was made hard contact. This is definitely a guy I'm looking at. Obviously, infield's pretty loaded at the age right now, but I can see Jacob Lowry maybe sneaking up. I don't know about this fall, but definitely after a winter of getting bigger, their body's developing. I think he could definitely be on the radar for the spring.
Yeah, and a guy who I think is athletic enough to where, I think outfield is the weaker position at the 13U age. He's a guy who is athletic enough to maybe move to the outfield if that opens up an opportunity for him. But again, I've liked what I've seen from him so far. He seems hungry. To me, he seems hungry to be a good baseball player. So I've been impressed so far. Let's move into our 30 to 21. Starting with Colin Sandler. He's twin of Max Sandler, we mentioned earlier. He's a number 11 outfield prospect, number 9, 15U prospect. Big, strong, good arm speed. He's a left-handed thrower, right-handed hitter. A guy who I think I've been really impressed by his pure tools. I think he's, again, great arm, good bat speed. I've been impressed by his tools. I think now the question becomes work ethic, which from what I've seen the first 2 weeks, it seems like he's going to work really hard and then just getting a ton of repetition and experience. But Colin Sandler been impressive so far. Giovanni Palucci, a household name. He's our number 29 prospect, 13 in the infield, 4 at 13U. A guy who, great work ethic. I think he's really developed on both sides of the ball this season. I think you want to see him kind of translate that into varsity success. I think that's the next step for him to really move up this list. I think, from what he's done on the developmental team to where he's done at the varsity team, I think he got a lot more passive and wasn't really taking that same attitude. I think that's kind of where I want to see him improve to really be aggressive and be a playmaker on that varsity team. Braden Colburn is a rookie. He is our number 12 infield prospect and number 8 15U prospect. Solid gloves, solid bat. Once again, I'd like to see him stand out in one of those areas. He's just, to me, just solid all around and a guy who I think if he'll put the work in, especially in the gym, I could see him definitely breaking into that 15U Floyd squad. Dominic Palucci going to come in next. He's our number 11 infield prospect, number 8 14U prospect. A guy who, again, we've touted him for his work ethic. I actually think he's taken a really nice step forward with his defense, and I think it's actually his bat that is a little underwhelming from last year to this year. He's gotten a little bit more passive, and I think for him, to see him really take the step that he needs to take, I think he's just got to get more aggressive and not be afraid to fail. It feels like lately he's been kind of in that mode where he's going up there to just put the ball in play or just, take a long at bat instead of being that aggressive guy he really came up as. And I think for him, it's a bump in the road for Don Palucci's development, but I still think he's got a very high ceiling, and with his work ethic, I think he could definitely get where he's trying to go going forward. Next up, Rudy Montenegro Langley. He's a guy who's brand new to the Bears. He's a number 4 catching prospect, number 4 12U prospect. I like this guy a lot, just my first impressions. Big, strong, I think solid defensively. Very excited to see more from him. Noah Hendricks is a number 10 outfield prospect, number 7 15U prospect. This is a guy who worked really, really hard the last 2 practices. I haven't got a chance to see him hit yet, but from what I've heard, I think Rob likes him a little bit. He sees some potential in him. I'm excited to see where he goes from here. Zach Wright coming up next. He's our number 10 infield prospect, number 7, 14U prospect. Super hard worker, super good bat. I'm excited to see what he can do going forward. Getting some opportunities with that Bell team to show out both offensively and defensively, and so far I've been very impressed. Joey Haddocken has been on the varsity team for the last couple weeks. He's our number 9 outfield prospect and number 6 14U prospect. He's a guy who I think has been very impressive, just solid all around, takes really good at bats, is serviceable in the outfield, and a guy who I've been very impressed with his work ethic and just the competitiveness that he's been putting on the varsity team. Lucas Colson's coming up next. He's our number 8 outfield prospect and number 6 15U prospect. Again, super hard worker. And I think that's kind of where you're seeing these rookies who we've just barely seen as we go up this list. These are guys who really stood out in either just pure talent or in the work ethic. Lucas Colson, definitely super, super talented. And the work ethic is there. I think this guy just needs to get more experience in tournament baseball and definitely needs to fall in love with the gym going forward. And finally, we have Jude Blattner, who rounds out our 30 to 21. He's our number 9 infield prospect and number 5 15U prospect. A guy who's put together a very nice season for himself. And I think going forward, definitely, if he falls in love with the gym, he could get real big and really put an effort to make that 15U Floyd team. Going 30 here to 21, KJ, a player here you want to expand on.
Well, I'll talk about Colin Sandler. He's a guy who's a lefty thrower and a righty bat. I think his bat is definitely raw. I think he's got definitely that hard swing, but it's just making it a little more violent. His swing it doesn't have the intentions that I think it should have right now. But definitely it's something that not other clubs really talk about too much. So I think he's a guy who's fully bought into what we're doing. He's in almost every single program, and I know he throws pretty hard off the mound too. So obviously, a lefty thrower is something that is valuable in itself. But when he can throw hard, and when I think his bat's going to be good, and he's going to play solid defense in the outfield, I think he makes for a very good looking prospect.
Yeah, I'm excited about him. From what we've seen the first couple weeks of him being on the Bears, I think he's got a very high ceiling, and it'll be interesting to see if he can really capture that. Bernie, a player here for you from 21 to 30 that you want to touch on.
Yeah, I'll go with another rookie from 15U. Give me Lucas Colson. I'm gonna be honest here. I've not seen this guy swing a bat at all, but just from the first practice, I know Robbie gave this speech to the 15U guys, especially the outfielders. Right, we're looking for playmakers, looking for guys with the right mentality. And I ran one drill with this kid. I ran one drill. It's basically a drill where it's competition who gets the ball, who wants the ball, who calls it. And Lucas Colson got every single ball. I mean, I was yelling about over there that he was able to get every single ball. And he was going against guys like Gunner, who's a very high prospect for us. Andrew Willeret, a lot of those top team outfielders, Dave Pastrana, and the confidence he had and just his mentality out there. And made me fall in love with him immediately.
Yeah, I think a lot of coaches have been raving about this guy over the past couple weeks. I know Jeff Driscoll, who Lucas Colson plays for him, and obviously Jeff's at practice. He's been talking a lot about this guy as well. I think all the coaches who have seen Lucas Colson have liked him, and that's a great first step for him. I think the work ethic's definitely there for him. I think it's about getting bigger and building his pure metrics, and I think for him, he's definitely on Rob's radar, and I think he could definitely be climbing up this list as the months go on. Let's move into the top 20. Now I kind of want to go one by one into the top 20. These really are the top prospects in the Bears. When we're looking at the next breed of varsity players and superstars, I think you'll find them here. Starting with Maxim Borodko, this is a guy who his season kind of got derailed by injury. He got hurt sliding and then was out for basically the last 2 months of the summer season. He is coming back soon, and I think he'll kind of pick up where he left off. He was our number 22 prospect when we did this list in February, now coming in at number 20. This guy who made the varsity team for a couple weeks. He put up solid numbers. I was really impressed by the discipline in his at-bats, and he's a guy who I think people started to forget about when he was hurt. He obviously wasn't around very much, and maybe the injury has kind of derailed his definitely a season, but maybe it's derailed his prospect hype. But until he comes back, I definitely think he's still a guy to watch out for. Bernie Maxim, a guy who's big, strong, solid in the infield, and a guy who I think before he got hurt was really working hard. I think the question, how's he going to be when he comes back? But what are your thoughts on Maxim Borodko going forward? He's our number 20 prospect here.
I mean, yeah, like I said, he had that big injury, kept him out for the majority of the season. But just in the short time he was able to play this season, I'm pretty sure if my memory is correct here, he started with Kreitler, went to Bell, and even got some time with Floyd. So I mean, he put up a very good season when he was here early in the year. Saw a lot of growth out of him early. Like I said, going from Kreitler to Bell to Floyd that quickly. And yeah, I mean, I think the hype's gone away a little bit because of the injury, but I think he'll be back and he'll be here to stay.
Yeah, and to your point, Bernie, he actually was even faster than that. He went straight from Kreitler to Floyd. He skipped that Bell step, and that tells you how much of an impact he was making on that Kreitler team. A lot of guys typically you move up the ladder from Kreitler to Bell to Floyd. He jumped straight to Floyd, so it shows you what kind of impact he was making. A very, very impressive season so far. Number 19, Georgie Buhazen. He's coming in our number 7 infield prospect, number 3 13U prospect, and this is a guy who feel like since the fall started, just the momentum he's kind of built as a prospect hype from that All Bear tournament to last weekend. I think he's really been building some momentum here. And, I believe he was on the varsity team this last weekend. KJ, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I definitely think he's starting to get some varsity chances. KJ, your thoughts on Georgie Buhazen, who it feels like has just been flying up the prospect ranks in the Bears so far. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, when we talk about work ethic, I think if this was a solely work ethic list, I think George would be near the top 10. The work this guy puts in, we talk about getting the most out of your body, and Georgie has a pretty small frame. He's a little guy, but he plays big. He's got a great mentality. I think just making him, he needs to be a little more aggressive, in my opinion, on defense. And when we talk about aggressive, we talk about offense a lot, but I think he's a little more aggressive on defense. Definitely, I've said before, the infield's kind of crowded. I think Georgie's going to find a spot in the outfield, but in order to do that, he's got to really be as aggressive as he is at the plate on defense. He's got to go want the ball. He's got to go attack the ball, and I don't know if he's doing that yet defensively, and that's where the kind of gap is between him and really getting some significant time on the top team. So I think once he really buys in to that approach on defense, I think you're really going to see him a lot because I love his mentality at the plate. I don't know if he's shown much physically yet. He hasn't been a great hitter, but we talk about the top teams. A lot of times, all the top teams have guys who are physically ready, but they need guys who have that mental toughness on their team. And I think Georgie has that, and so Georgie's a guy I definitely want on the top team. But we've definitely got to find a home for him on defense before we can lock him down on the top team for good.
Yeah, but if he can carry the momentum that he's kind of had the first couple weeks of the fall, definitely I think he could see his way flying up this prospect list. Moving on to number 18, it is Connor Kennedy. This is a guy who I like a lot, good size, strong, big, and I think a guy who has really impressed me so far this season. Bernie, this is a guy who have you been impressed? Tell me about. I know you've been impressed with him, and where do you see kind of his development taking place over the course of the fall?
Yeah, I've been impressed kind of early on here. Rookie here, I just only seen a couple weeks, but I've said on past shows. I mean, this kid does everything right. When he's at practice, he works very hard. He's going to play hard for. He's going to die for balls. He's going to slide hard into bags. But I mean, the question for me right now is, I think he's on my roster right now. But kind of where is he going to play for me? He's a catcher, but with guys like Brody Wilburn, Parker Cates, even Rudy, Owen Lewis, even we have a lot of different people on the team that can catch. But like I said, this guy's a guy who, will do a lot of different things for you. He can play infield, play outfield. I'm hoping that in the future, it's kind of raw right now, so I hope we can get him in free swing, maybe a couple of extra programs as well. I know a lot of new guys can't make the new programs the first month they're in, but I hope as we go forward, he continues to work hard, gets some extra programs, and I think, like you said, this kid's athletic, this kid's big, this kid's strong. Really, I mean, this guy has a very high ceiling.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. Moving on, up next is Owen Haynes. He is our number 7 outfield prospect, number 2 11U prospect. This is a guy who's come on the scene recently, joined the Bears, and I think has been Impressive. I know he had a 7K outing on the mound against a good team this past weekend in the limited action we had. He's a lefty pitcher. I was actually impressed by his at-bats as well. And according to Mac, he's a very, very good outfielder as well. So, Bernie, I'm going to go back to you on this one because I know you were at both of the, or at least two of the 11U Floyd games this weekend. Got to see this guy take a lot of reps. What were your thoughts on Owen Haynes?
Yeah. Like you said, I was with Mac a lot this weekend, and he raved about Owen Haynes, I should say, in the outfield. He would be a center fielder on a lot of 11 teams, but Lucas Closer has been very dominant out there for them. And then with the pitching, I was joking with Mac because that game that he pitched against that Tigers team, was a big game for them to win. Like it mattered a lot toward their seeding, like how many games they had to play for the bracket. And I was like, "You sure you don't want to go with a guy like a more proven guy like Owen Dobrinsky?" And he's like, "No, this Haynes guy's legit." And I mean, he proved me wrong. He went out there, he shoved, and gave them a chance to win that game.
Yeah, and it kind of strikes me like Gunnar Wilson with that 15U team, a rookie coming into a veteran pitching staff and getting and making, an impact. I was really impressed with him in that first weekend, and I think he's definitely going to develop as a big player for that 11U Floyd team. Up next is Seth Mullen. He is our number 6 infield prospect and number 4 15U prospect. This is a guy who instantly strikes you as super, super slick with the glove. I think, he kind of does remind me of Jaden Coleman last year, where he joined and is blowing everybody away with how slick with the glove he is. And then the question is going to be how well is he going to hit, and how much work is he going to put in, especially to build that body. But KJ, I know you've been impressed with this guy. Definitely a guy who's been turning some heads with his glove. But give me your thoughts on the development path that his bat could take, and if you could see him in the future being a big player for a varsity team.
Yeah. I think obviously when you talk about glove first guys, he could be one of them, but I think definitely his bat is going to take that next step, and he's the guy, a lot of varsity teams are going to like to have. Um, I think definitely his bat is going to come along.
Yeah, he's a guy who he's a lefty and he's more of a contact first guy right now, but I think that's something that the Bears are good at developing is turning guys who don't necessarily have a lot of power in them and turn them into power hitters. A couple of guys that come to mind, a guy like Cale Taylor, who is, if you look at him, he doesn't look like a big power guy. He's a little small, he's a little skinny, but we taught him how to swing so hard that he's able to put up big power numbers. I think if Seth really buys into that and becomes not afraid to swing and miss, I could see Seth Mullen, kind of developing into that type of player who's got more power than his size would necessarily indicate. So, guy who I think has been impressive so far. And moving on to number 15, Cole Miller, who's our number 2 16U prospect, number 5 infield prospect. This is a guy who, looks super, super athletic. I haven't gotten to see him play in a game yet, but just from practice and from what I've been hearing from Ike Dalton and Rob Floyd, talking to other coaches, a guy who I think has a high ceiling for potentially making this Dalton squad at some point. A solid glove guy and a guy who I think has the potential to be a big hitter. Bernie, give me your thoughts on Cole Miller. I know he impressed you in his first practice. What were your thoughts on Cole Miller?
Yeah. In the first prize, I mean, like honestly, if I'm comparing him to like another rookie, I'll compare him a lot to someone like Connor Kennedy, who they walk in and they're like, "Oh, that kid's an athlete." I mean, baseball skills maybe not as polished as you'd like them to be at this point for like a top team, but they're both athletes. Another guy that you just hope and you're salivating the fact that they could get in these extra programs, really have an opportunity to work hard this offseason. And like you said, if he works hard, I think he has a real shot at maybe pushing for that Dalton squad.
Yeah, I know he's been kind of in the talks of being a Dalton guy at some point. I believe he practiced with them last week, so I heard some good things about him from that Dalton camp. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with him. Number 13 is Dylan Graham. He is our number 4 infield prospect, number 4 14U prospect. Dylan was our number 41 prospect when we did this list back in February. And I think what caused him to go from 41 to 13 has just been the pure, step up in work ethic. This is a guy who I always wish would kind of get a little bit more involved, start getting an extra program, start working a little bit harder, miss a few less practices. And over the past 6 months, he's really, I feel like, gotten a lot more involved. He's in free swing most months. He is in precision pitching almost every month, and a guy who I think has really elevated his stock. He had his varsity debut last week and played well, with a couple guys out of town, got his chance. I thought he played pretty solidly, and a guy who I like a lot. And KJ, I think he's a guy who you like a lot as well. I know Bernie likes him a lot, but I want to give you a chance to talk on KJ because I think you give kind of a unique perspective from the outside who, you see him in free swing, you see him in precision pitching, you've played against him. What do you think of Dylan Graham, KJ, and his potential to be a top team player at some point?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. The work ethic's absolutely changed for him. He was a guy, I've always known his name and we've always known about him, but he was just the kind of guy I thought was a body. And I once I hadn't really talked to him till the spring. Last spring is the first time I really talked to him, and he's ready to go. He's hungry, and he cares a lot about this. So his free swing numbers, you can see in the numbers, have taken a huge step up. He's a guy who's always been a reliable glove. He can kind of do everything out there on the mound. He's a strike thrower. Obviously, I think his size is kind of what's a big separator of what's leaving him from the top team. But if he really, keeps the same work ethic he's had with his swing into the weight room this offseason, I think he could be a very good player for a top level team, an infielder, a guy who can throw strikes. And I think he'll be a very valuable asset for that team.
Yeah, 100%. He's a guy I've liked since he joined, and I was always hoping he would get a little bit more involved, and he definitely has done that last 6 months. Very excited what Dylan Graham has done. Moving into number 12, Hunter Finley. He's a number 6 outfield prospect, number 2 12U prospect. This is a guy that instantly I've really liked a lot. I think he brings a lot on defense. Even though I think this is kind of his first time in the outfield, he strikes me as a guy who's not afraid to make plays out there. I see him diving around in practice. I know he made a sliding catch in his first game with the Bears. A guy who I like what he could do potentially on the mound. The question for him, like several of these rookies, is what's he going to give us with the bat? He needs to get bigger and stronger. That's kind of the first thing, and he needs to really not be afraid to swing and miss and start swinging for these extra base hits. But Bernie, I'll let you talk about him. He's your player. Hunter Finley, give me your thoughts on the direction you see his kind of Bear career taking.
Yeah, like you said, the first time he walked into my practice, that's what position he played. He told me he was a pitcher and a first baseman. And looking at my team from last year, our biggest need we needed to be filled was our outfield, and in particular our center field. We really didn't have a starting center fielder out there. And I pretty much told him, hey, it's your job. I know you've never been out there before, but it's gonna be your job until you prove to me you can't do it. And I was really impressed in that first weekend of games. We had a very nice play out there. He already looks very good. He looks natural out there. He looks very clean out there. And then at practice last week, we were doing another one of those drills where it's kind of a competition. From the ball, we got to call between 4 people, and Hunter Finley was out there with guys again, top guys like Rowan, Brody Wilburn, Parker Cates, those type of guys, and he basically took over the drill, caught every ball. So I mean, his mentality is already there for me. Again, it's just another one of those things that we offer so many opportunities over the winter that if he can just buy in, I think his defense is almost already there. If he can just buy into free swing and that kind of stuff, take advantage of the opportunities this winter, he could be a very, very good player.
Moving on to number 11, Braden Schmidt, who I think arguably you could say is the most talented rookie that came through the door this year, just on pure talent. I like this guy a lot. He's our number 3 infield prospect and number 1 16U prospect. He's a guy who I think is definitely going to make an appearance on that Dalton team at some point this fall. Left-handed bat who he does kind of remind me of Seth Mullen. I think they're very similar builds, but I think he's kind of got that a little bit higher potential with the bat right now. He's a little bit stronger than Seth, obviously a year older than Seth, but a guy who very slick with the glove. I think, his first practice, he was actually practicing with the 18-year-olds, and he instantly fit right in with those guys. And I thought he looked really, really slick with the glove. And then I got to see him take a couple of bats this past weekend, and he was hitting some balls hard. It wasn't like when you think of a defensive first, slick fielder, shortstop, you think of, bloop singles, maybe slapping the ball the other way. He pulled 2 balls into the right center gap that were hit really hard, that I was impressed to see. He was hitting with a lot more power than I kind of expected, and a guy who I think will make an appearance at Dalton at some point. I've been really, really impressed by what I've seen from Braden Schmidt so far. Let's move into the top 10 Bear prospects, starting with number 10, Bill Lobeck. This is a guy who's been around for a while. He was a rookie last year. He was a number 29 prospect when we did this back in February. He's moved into the top 10, getting a chance on a varsity team as of late, and a guy who I think, I think you do want to see a little bit more from him on both sides of the ball, both in the defensive and offensive side of things. But I think the number one thing he's got going for him is hunger and work ethic. Those are 2 things that I think he's really, really gotten down. But KJ, give me your thoughts on Phil Lobeck and the transition you see him making from being a good prospect to kind of being a starter on a varsity team.
Oh yeah, he's definitely got to find his role in the outfield. I think that's the thing that's the biggest separator for him. I don't think he's going to do much more offensively than what we have right now. So what he's got to do to break in is got to do more defensively than what we have right now. And as of the state of the outfield that we have at the age right now, I think if he can be a guy who's very reliable in the outfield, even if his bat is not as good, he will play more. And so I think that's where he needs to find a role at. I think he really needs to buy into wanting to be the starting center fielder and not being content with being a bench guy. I think, he was really hungry to get up to the top team, and now that he's here, I don't want him to get content with just being here. I want him to be hungry to be a starter, and I think that's the biggest thing that's separating him. I think he needs to really devote his time to not only being a better hitter, but really wanting to be a better outfielder.
Yeah, a guy that you just love the work ethic of, and I think he'll figure it out. He's so hungry to me that he's one of those guys that I think won't let himself fail. And even if the shine of being on a varsity team is still there right now, I think that'll wash off very quickly where he's sick of sitting on the bench, and I think he'll take that job at some point. I have high hopes for Phil Lobeck. I like him a lot. Our number 9 prospect is Gunnar Wilson. He is our number 415. All right, number 315 U prospect, number 4 outfield prospect. And this guy, obviously, super impressive in the first week of Bear competition. A guy who instantly is striking everybody that he could be a starter on this 15U Floyd team. I think people are scared of him. They're scared he's going to take their jobs. Obviously, he can catch as well. He's a very solid arm. And I think the question, like a lot of these rookies, is how much is he going to hit? But I think Gunnar Wilson certainly has been making his mark so far in his first couple weeks with the Bears. Moving into number 8, Matthew Bender. He's a number 2 infield prospect, number 2 15U prospect. This is a guy who was number 6 when we did this list in February. Now he's number 8, which basically I think is a wash. He's basically in the same spot. But I think what has kind of prevented him from moving up this list has just been the consistency. He's a guy who obviously is a very hit or miss kind of hitter. He's swinging for the fences every single time. I think he's kind of missed that consistency over the course of the year. And a guy who I believe had an injury at some point, if I'm not wrong about that. I believe he was at least limited at some point during the season, but a guy who I still think has a lot of potential going forward. KJ or Bernie, either one of you want to take a stab at Matthew Bender? Any thoughts on Matt Bender?
I really like Matt Bender. He's got that violent swing, like you said, and he's another guy. I think the work ethic is really ramped up for him. He's doing stuff almost every single day during the week. I see him, and he's a guy who wants to work hard. He's falling in love with the weight room. He already had sort of that big frame, but he's kind of starting to fill it out in the weight room, getting bigger, getting stronger, and he already came through the door hitting very hard. And I think we're going to be really excited for how hard he's going to be hitting the ball. And I think he does find a spot defensively. I don't think he's the greatest, but definitely on a team like Rob's, he's a bat first team, and he'll find a spot on defense for that big bat he's going to have.
Yeah, that team's just very, very crowded right now. So we'll see if Matthew Bender can kind of find his place. Moving into number 7, it is Joey Burgess. He's our number 2 catching prospect, number 3 14U prospect. He was number 33 ranked prospect back in February. He moves all the way up to number 7, and I think we've seen a lot of polish with him. We've seen him take a step forward defensively, but obviously the reason he's the number 7 prospect is not his defense, it's his bat. I believe he's up over 90 miles an hour exit velocity now. KJ, you can confirm that for us. Is he over 90 now?
Who you talking about?
Joey Burgess?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, he's
yeah,
over
he hit it
90.
just
Okay.
recently.
So
Yes.
yeah, he's over 90 with the bat, and I think that's why, the hype is there for him. Barney, I want to go ahead and send this one to you. This is a guy who big, strong. What do you think of Joey Burgess and kind of his potential to break into that varsity team in the next couple months?
Yeah, this is a guy that from what I know, basically joining like has bought all the way in to our to our philosophy here, and like you say, he's up over 90 now. He's become a lot more polished hitter. I could be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure he spent some stint with all three of our 14 teams with Kryler, Bell, and Floyd now. He moved to the ranks fairly quickly. Just with the defense, I don't know if it's gonna be hard for him to break into that Floyd roster because with Logan Meyer, Quinn Steinbeck back behind the plate. But I think, like you said, with the bat there, I think that on a team like yours, kind of like Rob, you will find a spot for him because of that bat.
Yeah, 100%. I'm very excited about Joey Burgess. Moving into number 6, this is our number 3 rookie prospect on the list. He's our number 1 infield prospect and number 1 11U prospect. It's Carson Griffith, who's a guy who is young, 11U guy who's come into the Bears, big, strong, swings really hard, crushed a ball this weekend. A guy who I know Max really, really excited about. I'm not sure where he hit in the order this weekend, but I imagine he's going to be in the top 5 somewhere over the course of the fall. KJ, Carson Griffith, a guy who I think a lot of coaches are kind of turning their heads at and thinking that this guy could be a superstar in the Bears. And when you're talking about the Rookie of the Year race, I think Carson Griffith is right up there. Give me your thoughts on Carson Griffith going forward.
Yeah, obviously I think everyone's raving about the size of this kid. He's probably the biggest kid on that team. And he's a much needed bat. I think he slides in perfectly with, the big bats in that order like Closter, Dobrinsky, Ahern. I think you add another one like him and a guy who can play a reliable third base for you. I think that was a position that moved around a lot last year for that team. So I think getting him to play a reliable third base is big. And I think the big advantage he has is that he's going to be on top team starting right away. And I think that's some of the other prospects we're going to look at don't really have that yet. So he's going to slot into the middle of the order, like you said, right away. And we've already seen kind of the effect he had on the team. I mean, they're playing a very good baseball this past week in limited games, but they're playing very good baseball. And I think we didn't see that kind of production from this team last spring. So you can already see the effects he's having. Another guy, Owen Haynes is having on that team, but definitely Carson Griffith, that big body, is going to play a big role for that team for years to come.
Yeah, super high ceiling. I think a lot of people are very excited. Moving into the top 5, we've got 2 rookies and 3 second year players on here in the top 5, and I think a lot of guys people are very, very excited about, starting with Jack Kester. He was kind of the talk of the town at 14U over the last week or so. He's our number 3 outfield prospect and number 2 14U prospect, a guy who is big, athletic, got his chance on the varsity team this weekend, and a guy who I think a lot of people are starting to look at as maybe a big star in the future. And KJ, I know this is the guy who you've seen, strong, athletic. Where do you think, you know, and I'll open this to Bernie as well. If there were a player or at least a player archetype that you could compare Jack Kessler to, whether it be a former player, a current player, anybody you guys can think of that's kind of a comparison for Jack Kester, KJ or Bernie?
Um, Hard to think of one guy, but I know Kester's got that big lefty swing. But I think what kind of separates him is he's got that big lefty powerful swing, and he also plays very good defense. I think a lot of times when you get a guy with that powerful of a swing, he's more of a hitter first, and I think Kester can play good defense as well. Obviously, I think he's going to be on the mound a little bit too. Maybe not for the top team, but he'll see some innings on the mound. So, kind of hard to find a comparison, in my opinion. I don't know if Bernie can, but yeah, I
Um,
like him a lot.
mean, just by off of what Robbie and Kenny have said, I haven't watched kid play too much other than running through some drills of defense. But an older archetype that you could possibly think of, like guy who's not going to maybe see top any mounds or top innings on the mound. Big power bat. This guy I'm comparing him to is a righty though. Maybe a bat first, but still a decent little center fielder. What about a little Gavin Degnan comparison from years ago?
Okay, yeah, I like that one a lot. Gavin Degnan was a great player for a long time. Obviously, he was hitter first. I think Kessler definitely has a better defensive ceiling than Degnan, but I think that's a great offensive comparison. I think he's going to be power first, more than, I think he'll hit for a good batting average, but I think he's going to be more power focused. The ball that he hit this weekend that was most impressive, he hit a ball that I swear to you went at least 150 feet straight up in the air. I mean, it was hit so hard straight in the air. It was crushed. I mean, just straight up. And I think if he puts that ball even, a 50 launch angle, it would have gone out. It was probably hit, I don't know, a 90 launch angle. That would be straight to the catcher, right? So probably 88 launch angle because it was caught by like shallow second base. It was hit straight in the air. A guy who I think's got a ton of power. And I think that Gavin Degnan prediction is not too far off, Bernie. I think that's a good one. Moving into the top four, Dane Pastrana. He's a number 2 outfield prospect, number 1 15U prospect. He was number 8 on this list when we did it in February, number 4 now, and a guy who I would say his kind of momentum as a prospect was very high, and then it dipped a little bit in the middle of the season, and now it's coming right back up. I think in the middle of the season where I wouldn't say he went through a slump, but he wasn't getting that many at bats with the top team and wasn't hitting for a lot of power. And I think he's kind of starting to catch some prospect momentum once again. KJ, a guy that I know you like a lot. Give me your thoughts on Dane Pastrana and if he can. What is the path for him to make it into that 15U Floyd lineup?
Yeah, I think that the problem is they got so many good hitters. You got to separate yourself, and I think Dane's going to have to separate himself by kind of the same kind of thing we talked about with Phil Lobeck. He's going to have to play good defense in the outfield. I think once he really buys into being a good outfielder, he'll slide in there. But he's not doing enough right now. Pass anymore with the bat. If he's doing the same with the bat as the other outfielders, he's not going to pass him. He's got to do more defensively. So I think that's the step for him that he's got to take. I know he's doing what he can right now. He's in free swing. He's putting in the work. But like I said, he's a little skinny. I think he really devotes to the weight room. And Dane's going to work hard. He's a guy with a huge work ethic. So he really devotes to the weight room, getting bigger, getting stronger. And he's already hitting the ball at a really good velocity for his age. So I think once he gets bigger and stronger, we could really see Dane Pastrana take off. I know Rob already loves him. So I think once he gets bigger and stronger, he's really going to have no problem sliding into that starting role.
Yeah, and to second that, KJ, I think the other thing is we need to see him hit for power on the varsity team. He was a guy who was able to hit doubles for Driscoll, and then it felt like he got to the varsity team, and all of a sudden he's only hitting singles. And maybe part of that could be the competition level, but I think a big part of it is him trying not to fail on Rob's team instead of trying to be a superstar. And I think he's not going to break into the starting lineup just hitting singles. I think he needs to impress defensively and also start hitting for a little bit more power. And then I think we'll see Dane Pastrana really could be a solid starter for that 15 Floyd team. Moving into the top 3, our number 1 rookie here on the prospect list is Trey Vonderheide. He is our number 1 first base prospect, our number 1 12U prospect, a guy with a ton of power. And Bernie, for the sake of this list, I put him at first base on the prospect list, even though obviously he's blocked there a little bit with Harrison Blaybom, but that is his natural position. But I will say I was very, very impressed by his outfield defense for a guy who I'm not sure he's played there a whole bunch. He looked very, very natural in the outfield, and I think everybody's in love with him for his bat. But if he's going to play a good even above average outfield, he becomes a very enticing prospect. Bernie, I think this is the guy that people are looking at to maybe be the favorite to win Rookie of the Year. Give me your thoughts on Trey Vonderheide and what do you think the ceiling is for him in his first year with the Bears?
Yeah, this guy I've been very impressed with again early on. For me with Trey, I don't know if it's just nerves. I don't know what it is, but he's way more passive than I'd like him to be. Like if you look at his stats right now, he's walked in I think over half his plate appearances with my team, and like he'll take that pitch, like an inch off the inside of the plate or an inch high, like those 50-50 calls with the umpires. But those are pitches that if he's in the right mindset, right, if he's in our mindset, our mentality up there, he can absolutely crush those balls for doubles and even home runs. I tell my middle of the order guys like Harris Leibon, Cale Taylor, Brody Wilburn that them walking's not a bad thing, but they're there to hit, right? If the pitch is an inch in off the plate, I want them to turn that ball for a double. And I think just getting trained that mindset that he's up there to hit. I want him to be my 4 or 5 here in the future. He's up there to hit. I, you know, his ceiling. I mean, call me crazy, but like he could be like a Harris Leon type. Like he has that power in his bat. It's just a matter of unlocking it as we go here.
Yeah, 100%. I think he does have that kind of ceiling, and for him, I think, I think realistically, I think that's Bernie. I think Harrison Blaybaum's kind of like the ultimate ceiling. I think realistically, he could be the second best hitter on this team when we're talking about him in May next year. He could realistically be the second best hitter on that 12U Burnsville team, and I think that for him is the ceiling comparison I want to make. Let's go ahead and move on. Number 2 is Braden Miller. He's our number 1 outfield prospect, number 1 14U prospect. He was number 10 when we did this list in February. He's number 2 now. For a guy who's super, super raw, still not a lot of tournament baseball experience, a guy who I think is really, really been impressive so far. I've been impressed with the maturity of his at-bats, even though sometimes he gets overmatched just because of his lack of experience, it feels like he's not making a lot of bad decisions. He stopped, for the most part, he stopped chasing curveballs in the dirt. He stopped swinging at fastballs over his head. He's really started to take mature at bats while still being aggressive. And I think that's been what's most impressive for him. He started to really develop defensively, where I don't feel like I can't put him out there. He's definitely not a defensive first guy, but if I stick him in the outfield for a couple innings, he's not gonna. He's not going to embarrass himself out there. He'll make the easy plays. So I think those two things have really impressed me. KJ, a guy who I know you really like a lot. Give me 2 things. I want to hear just your overall thoughts on Braden Miller and the path he's kind of taken since February. And I also want to think, what is the ceiling case for him? Could he be a top 5 hitter on this 14 Floyd team? What do you think is the ceiling for Braden Miller? And just give me your thoughts on him since February, his development path.
Yeah, I take a lot of pride in knowing, I think I was the biggest Brady Miller fan all off season. I had really high hopes for him, and he was really slow to get going, but I think he's really getting going now, and I think he's really developed into a more mature player. He was very raw to start, hadn't had a lot of time in club baseball, and he's really bought in to what we're doing. He always had that hard aggressive swing, but it was kind of having more mature at bats, like you said, not swinging curveballs in the dirt, not swinging fastballs over his head. I think that's been the biggest change for him, and being better in the outfield as well. But I think he's definitely a guy who could be a top, 10 hitter in the Bears. I mean, he's got the mentality, he's got the work ethic, he's got the swing. He's going to give you his all. He's a guy who's going to run through a wall for you. We want playmakers in the outfield. He's a playmaker. We want guys who are swinging for the fences. He's the guy who's swinging for the fences. We want guys who are in love with the weight room. He's in love with the weight room. Everything Brady Miller's doing right now is for baseball, and I think that's a big thing out of these young guys. Every decision he makes right now is to make top team to thrive at baseball, and so he's doing all the right things right now. And I don't think it's far fetched at all to see him be a top team starter by even the end of the fall. The way he's progressing right now.
Yeah, 100%, KJ. I think that's definitely in the realm of possibility. Finally, our number 1 prospect here, it is Garrett Knight. He is our number 1 catching prospect, number 1 13U prospect. This guy was ranked 13th when we did this in February. He's number 1 right now, and I think that kind of ranking from 13 to 1 is just indicative of how quickly he developed. I thought he was going to be a lot more raw than he was. Especially with the bat, I didn't know how quick his development path was going to take, to where I thought this weekend, KJ, you can correct me if I'm wrong, from the bats I watched your team take in the one game you guys played this weekend, I thought Garrett Knight was just up there with everybody else. Even last weekend in the All Bears tournament, I thought Garrett Knight was taking as good of at bats as every other guy in the lineup. And I think just the fact that he's developed so quickly, KJ, Garrett Knight, I think what is the ceiling for him with the bat? I think he kind of reminds me of Diego Buccio when he came up, but I think he can maybe even have a little bit higher potential than Diego. But what do you think, KJ? Where does Garrett Knight rank right now on your team? And what do you think is the ceiling for him going forward?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, he came out of nowhere. We've always preached, how good this guy is. Um, and he when we needed him most, he really took that next step. And looks like he's been here for a long time. It doesn't seem like he's still prospect. He looks the part. He's taking mature at bats is something like we saw with Braden Miller, something he didn't do at first, swinging at bad pitches, and he's taking mature at bats. He's taking great at bats actually, which is something I didn't expect from him. I thought when we got him, I knew he'd hit for some power, but I thought he'd a bottom of the order guy, hit or miss kind of guy. But this guy's taking great at bats. He's walking. He's taking walks, which is something I never thought he would do. I thought he'd be a strikeout, home run kind of guy. He's taking curveballs. I mean, he's hitting fastballs in the zone. He's doing everything right. And even on defense, it's tough. We got a lot of good catchers at that age, but even when he's in there in defense, he's holding his own. I mean, everything this guy's doing right now, he's doing things right. And I think I'm a biggest Diego fan in the Bears. I think Garrett Knight has more potential than Diego. Just with his bat, I think Garrett Knight is more mature with the bat than Diego. I think Diego definitely, right now is a better player and he's better in the outfield. But Garrett Knight's work ethic, I mean, he's got the kind of work ethic, we raved about with ZZ Garcia and with guys like Braden Miller. He's got that work ethic too. So I could go on for days about this guy, but I don't know if I could really think of a guy right now that he kind of is like. I mean, maybe I think the closest one could possibly be Landon Nickerson. Landon's a guy you look at and you wouldn't think he's a good mature hitter, but Landon's has a good eye. He's not afraid to take some walk. Not afraid. He doesn't swing at bad pitches, and that's kind of how Garrett Knight looked to me. Garrett Knight hits the ball super hard already, like Landon does. He's not a super defender like Landon is, but he's a guy you have to have in the lineup for his bat. And I think Garrett Knight's kind of if we can get Garrett Knight to be what Landon Nickerson is, that's a huge addition for the team.
Yeah, and I think the chance is definitely there for Garrett with how quickly he's developed since he joined the Bears to where he is right now. If he takes that same mentality into the winter and really falls in love with the gym and really kind of goes into this winter instead of being this, super raw, still kind of learn how to play baseball. If he goes into this winter thinking, okay, I'm a top team player, all right, and I'm gonna show everybody that I'm a superstar, kind of like what ZZ Garcia did, where he went from being super raw to okay, I belong with the top team too. Now he's the best player on the team. If Garrett takes that same mentality, I could definitely see him being one of the best players in the Bears, and I think definitely deserving of that #1 prospect ranking. But that's going to do it for our top 50 prospects. Going to be very excited to take another look at this list in November when we re-rank all of these guys and see who's graduated from our prospect ranks. I think this was a great episode, getting a chance to talk about a lot of guys who maybe don't necessarily get talked about on BBN, and going to be very excited for the future of all these players. But that's going to do it for this episode of BBN After Dark. KJ, Bernie, thank you for joining me and giving me your time. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you all next week.